The air on the flight line shimmers with heat, a visible thing you can almost touch. It's a place of immense power, a place where the air itself smells of kerosene and hot metal, the twin perfumes of modern warfare. For a pilot, this is the office, and out here ritual is everything. The walk around is a sacrament. You trace the lines of your aircraft with your eyes, with your gloved hands. You are looking for imperfections, for the one small thing that is out of place. You are looking for the tell, the hint that the $100 million machine you are about to strap yourself into is not ready to defy gravity. You are searching for the whisper of a problem in a machine that is built to shout. He trusts the machine. He has to. It's a covenant made between man and a thinking, breathing assembly of composites and code. This machine is the F-35 Lightning II, the most expensive, most technologically advanced weapon system in human history. Its skin is a dark, matte gray, designed to drink radar waves and disappear. Its cockpit is a marvel, a $10 million helmet that allows the pilot to see through the very floor of his own aircraft. It is less a machine and more a promise of dominance, a promise of survival. But on this day, the ritual is broken. The pilot's eyes, trained to see the flaws others miss, catch something. Not on a wing, not on the landing gear, not on a missile pylon, but deep inside the engine bay, on a small metal tube that carries coolant. There, on a bracket holding the tube in place, is a crack. It isn't a catastrophic failure. It's a hairline fracture, a ghost of a line in the metal, so small you could cover it with a thumbnail. It's the kind of thing that, in a car, you might not notice for 1,000 miles, but this isn't a car. This is a single-engine fighter jet that operates at the very edge of what is physically possible. And at 9 Gs, a hairline crack can become a catastrophic rupture in the blink of an eye. The report is filed, the aircraft is grounded, and then another pilot on another base finds the same crack, and then another, and another. Soon the whispers become a roar. The problem isn't isolated, it's systemic. Within days, the order comes down from the highest levels of the Pentagon. The entire fleet, hundreds of these technological marvels, the tip of America's spear, stationed on bases and aircraft carriers around the globe, is grounded. The most powerful air force the world has ever known is suddenly and quietly on its feet, unable to fly. The war machine had come to a halt, not because of an enemy missile, not because of a cyber attack, not because of a political crisis, but because of a small, crumbling piece of insulation on a coolant tube. An investigation would later trace the failure back to the smallest component in the assembly, a single, specialized screw, a fastener, whose failure under the intense heat and vibration of the engine allowed a cascade of small problems to become a fleet-wide crisis. The cost of that screw? Maybe $20. The cost of the weapon system it had just grounded. That's a number so large it almost loses meaning. To understand how a $20 part could paralyze a nation's air power, you have to understand the dream that created the F-35. It was born not of steel and wire, but of an idea that took hold in the Pentagon after the Cold War. The world was changing. The old enemies were gone, and the new ones were unpredictable. What America needed, the strategists argued, was not a fleet of specialized aircraft, one for dogfighting, one for bombing, one for ground support. What it needed was a chameleon, a single aircraft that could do everything for everyone, a jack of all trades for a new century of warfare. It would be a fighter for the Air Force, nimble and long-ranged. It would be a rugged attack jet for the Marines, capable of taking off from short, primitive runways and landing vertically like a helicopter. And it would be a carrier-based warrior for the Navy, with reinforced landing gear and folding wings to withstand the brutal, controlled crashes of a carrier landing. And it would do all of this while being a ghost, a stealth aircraft invisible to enemy radar, a quarterback in the sky that could see everything and be seen by nothing. It was a beautiful, breathtakingly ambitious idea. It was the promise of a perfect weapon. But perfection has a price. And the price of the F-35 program would become a legend. It was, from the very beginning, the most complex engineering project ever attempted. 3 different versions of the same aircraft, sharing parts, but with fundamentally different designs, all being developed at the same time. The complexity was staggering. The software alone required more lines of code than the entire space shuttle program. It was a creature built by a committee of rivals. The Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, and a coalition of allied nations, all demanding their own specific capabilities, all adding their own layers of weight and cost and complication. The initial budget, a number that seemed impossibly high at the time, was soon a distant memory. The costs began to climb. The timeline began to slip. A year, then 5, then a decade behind schedule. The program became a punchline in Washington, a symbol of government waste, but it was too big to fail. Too much had been invested, too many jobs were at stake, too many promises had been made to allies, and so the money kept flowing. The total lifetime cost of the program, to build, fly, and maintain the F-35 fleet over the next 50 years, is projected to be nearly $3 trillion. $3 trillion. It is a number so vast that our minds can't properly hold it. It is more than the entire Apollo program that put a man on the moon, adjusted for inflation. It is enough money to rebuild America's crumbling interstate highway system several times over. It is a river of wealth diverted from schools, from hospitals, from science, and poured into a single magnificent and deeply troubled weapon. It is the cost of a promise, the promise of air supremacy for the next half-century. And that is what makes the image of the grounded fleet so terrifying. It reveals the profound fragility at the heart of our most complex creations. We build these systems of unimaginable power, these flying supercomputers that can bend the laws of physics to their will. We pour our national treasure into them. We stake our security on them. We believe in their infallibility. And then a $20 screw fails. A tiny piece of metal forgotten in a sea of trillion-dollar ambition reminds us that the chain of technology is only as strong as its weakest link. It's a story about a screw, yes, but it's also a story about us, about our faith in technology, and the catastrophic price of a single, simple mistake. It is the story of how the smallest thing can break the biggest promise. To understand the promise, you must first understand the machine. Not as a single object, a sleek grey fighter jet on a runway, but as a convergence of impossibly complex systems, each a universe of engineering unto itself. It begins with the fire at its heart. The Pratt & Whitney F-135 is not merely an engine. It is a controlled explosion, a harnessed hurricane of chemical energy. At full afterburner, it generates over 43,000 pounds of thrust. This is not an abstract number. It is the force required to lift a column of 35 family cars 1 foot off the ground. To achieve this, the engine ingests over 300 pounds of air every second, compressing it to unimaginable pressures and temperatures before injecting it with a fine mist of JP-8 jet fuel. Inside the combustion chamber, the temperature exceeds 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, a heat that would vaporize steel in an instant. The turbine blades that live within this inferno are not forged from simple metal. They are grown atom by atom into single crystal superalloys of nickel, rhenium, and hafnium, materials that technically should not exist, their molecular structures perfected to withstand forces that would tear any lesser substance apart. Each blade, no bigger than your hand, costs more than a luxury sedan, and there are hundreds of them, spinning at over 10,000 revolutions per minute. The tips of these blades travel at nearly the speed of sound, their clearance is measured in microns, a fraction of the width of a human hair. This mechanical violence is governed by a ghost. The aircraft's nervous system is comprised of more than 8 million lines of software code. This is 4 times the code that ran the entire space shuttle. It is a symphony of logic that integrates 1,000 streams of data in real time. It is the code that flies the plane, a fly-by-wire system, making millions of micro-adjustments every second, transforming the pilot's inputs into the precise deflection of control surfaces, keeping an inherently unstable airframe balanced on a knife's edge. It is the code that fuses the information from its radar, its infrared sensors, its 360-degree camera system, and its electronic warfare suite into a single, coherent picture of the battle space, displayed not on a screen, but projected directly onto the pilot's visor. And it is the code that is constantly being written, rewritten, and debugged, a perpetual work in progress that makes every F-35 not a finished product, but a node in an ever-evolving network. All of this is wrapped in a skin that is itself a weapon. The charcoal gray material is a composite matrix of carbon fiber, epoxy, and bismuth imide baked in giant autoclaves under immense pressure and heat. It is lighter than aluminum, but stronger than steel. Embedded within this composite and layered on top of it is a classified radar-absorbent material, a delicate and toxic coating that must be maintained with surgical precision. A single scratch, a misplaced panel, a loose fastener, can compromise its stealth, turning a near-invisible hunter into a billion-dollar target on an enemy's radar screen. But the aircraft itself is only the tip of a logistical spear that spans the globe. To keep a single F-35 in the air for 1 hour requires a vast hidden pyramid of support. It begins with fuel. The jet holds 18,500 pounds of JP-8 in its internal tanks, nearly 2,800 gallons. A single squadron of 12 jets, flying a routine 2-hour training mission, will burn through more than 220,000 pounds of fuel. That's the equivalent of the gasoline consumed by over 4,000 cars on their daily commute. For a carrier strike group at sea, the daily fuel requirement for its air wing can exceed 100,000 gallons, a constant demand met by a fleet of replenishment oilers, lumbering tankers that are themselves a critical and vulnerable link in the chain. And this is just the cost of the fuel itself. The fully burdened cost, the price of refining it, protecting it, and delivering it via a KC-135 Stratotanker to a fighter over the Pacific, can push the price of a single gallon to over $400. And then there is the human element, the pilot, who is not just an operator but an integrated component of the weapon system. The physical demands are brutal. In a high G-turn, the 9 times the force of gravity pressing down on their body, their blood is pulled from their brain towards their feet. Their heart must labor to pump a liquid that now weighs as much as molten iron. Their G-suit inflates, squeezing their legs and abdomen to keep them conscious. All the while, they must breathe a carefully managed mixture of oxygen from the onboard oxygen generation system, another complex chemical plant miniaturized and stuffed into the jet's airframe. A pilot on a 4-hour combat mission can burn over 3,000 calories, the metabolic equivalent of running a marathon, while sitting in a cockpit the size of a phone booth. This requires its own supply line of water, of nutrient paste, of specially formulated rations. Every ounce is calculated, every calorie is accounted for. The pilot's helmet alone is a $400,000 marvel of carbon fiber, optics and sensors, custom fitted to their skull, serving as their office, their communications hub, and their window into the fused reality the jet's computers have created for them. This entire colossal enterprise, the single crystal turbine blades from a foundry in Connecticut, the 8 million lines of code written in Texas, the composite fuselage cured in California, the fuel pumped from a refinery in Louisiana, the pilot trained in Florida, was brought to a standstill by a fastener. Not a complex component, not a marvel of material science, but a high-strength titanium bolt, designated AN6H23A. It is 1.5 inches long, with a hexagonal head and a fine thread. Its cost is roughly $26. This particular bolt was one of several dozen used to secure a stator vane assembly inside the high-pressure turbine of the F-135 engine. During a routine borescope inspection of an engine at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, a maintenance technician noticed something wrong. A tiny crack, barely visible, emanating from the head of one of these bolts. The bolt was removed. Under an electron microscope, metallurgists discovered the cause: hydrogen embrittlement. During the electroplating process, a critical step that coats the bolt in a protective layer of cadmium to prevent corrosion, microscopic hydrogen atoms had infiltrated the crystalline structure of the titanium alloy. This made the metal brittle, susceptible to cracking under the immense stress and vibration inside the engine. An investigation was launched, tracing the bolt not to a supplier or a factory, but to a single manufacturing lot. A batch of several thousand bolts, all processed in the same chemical bath on the same day, was now suspect. Every single one of them was a potential microscopic time bomb. A query was run through ALICE, the F-35's massive, complex logistics database. The results were terrifying. Bolts from that lot had been installed in the engines of over 200 F-35s across the US Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, as well as in the fleets of several allied nations. The physics of the potential failure were unforgiving. If the bolt were to shear, the stator vane it secured would be liberated into the gas path of the turbine. A 1-pound piece of metal hitting a turbine blade spinning at 13,000 RPM would have the kinetic energy of a truck hitting a brick wall. The result would be a catastrophic, uncontained engine failure, sending white-hot shrapnel through the fuel tanks and hydraulic lines, turning the world's most advanced fighter jet into a falling, burning coffin. The risk was infinitesimally small, but the consequence was absolute. And so the order came down. The entire fleet was grounded. The $3 trillion war machine, the culmination of a half-century of technological ambition, was neutralized. Not by an enemy missile, not by a cyber attack, but by a flaw measured in atoms, in a $26 screw. For the engineers in climate-controlled labs and the generals in subterranean command centers, the grounding order was a problem of logistics and politics. A cascade of secure messages, a flurry of phone calls, a crisis to be managed. It was a headline, a budget line, a strategic setback. But on the sharp edges of the world, in the places where the machine's shadow was meant to provide shelter, the order arrived not as a message, but as a silence. A profound and terrible emptiness in the sky where thunder was supposed to live. The absence of a guardian. The cost of a $20 screw would not be measured in dollars, but in the final frantic heartbeats of men who had been promised they would never have to fight alone. Half a world away, in a sun-baked maze of rock and dust that had swallowed armies for centuries, Marine Staff Sergeant Michael Reyes was counting bullets. Not his own, but the collective remainder for his 12-man squad. They had been holding a ridge for 3 days, a worthless piece of high ground that had become, as these places do, the most important piece of real estate on Earth. They were the fulcrum, the forward observers for an offensive that was supposed to begin at dawn. But the dawn had come and gone, and the only thing it brought was more enemy fire. Reyes's radio operator, a kid from Ohio named Peters who still had acne on his chin, had been on the SATCOM for an hour, his voice growing tighter with each transmission. They had a danger-close fire mission called in. An F-35, call sign Archangel, was scheduled to deliver 2 500-pound J-dams on a fortified machine gun nest that had them pinned. The strike was their key. The key to moving forward, the key to pulling back, the key to living through the next 10 minutes. The appointed time passed. Then it was 10 minutes late. Then 30. The enemy, sensing a shift, a hesitation, grew bolder. Mortar rounds began to walk their way up the ridge. Reyes crawled over to Peters, the loose shale sliding under his hands. The kid was pale, his eyes wide. He held the handset out to Reyes. The voice on the other end was tinny, detached, a voice from another planet of safety and procedure. Archangel is unavailable. All air assets are currently static. Stand by for further. Static, a word for laundry clinging together, for bad reception. Now it was a death sentence. Reyes didn't understand the reason. He didn't care about maintenance cycles or fleet-wide directives. His world had shrunk to this single, sun-blasted ridge. He saw the enemy fighters moving in the rocks below, no longer afraid of the sky. They knew. Somehow they knew the great metal bird was not coming. He looked at his men, their faces caked in grime, their eyes fixed on him, waiting for the wisdom, the answer he did not have. He thought of the promise of the machine, the articles he'd read, the briefings he'd sat through, a cloak of invisibility, a fist of God that could reach down and erase your enemies. It was a lie, a $3 trillion lie, broken by a piece of metal smaller than his thumb. His men had faith in the machine, and he had faith in them. Now, all they had left was each other, and the dwindling number of rounds in their magazines. The real cost was measured in the sudden, horrifying calculus of how many of his men he could afford to lose, taking a position they were supposed to have obliterated from the sky. Far to the north, in a different kind of war, a cold and quiet one, the silence was felt differently. Here the enemy wasn't a man with a rifle, but the land itself. An 8-man special forces team was deep in the frosted taiga, 100 miles from any friendly line. Their mission was to watch, to listen, to be ghosts. For 3 weeks, they had lived in the biting cold, their bodies fueled by nutrient paste and their resolve hardened by training. Their high-tech gear allowed them to see in the dark, to hear whispers from a mile away, but it could not make them warm. It could not fill their bellies. Their survival depended on a delicate, invisible thread of logistics stretching back across the frozen mountains. A single C-130, flying low and fast under the protection of an F-35 escort, was that thread. It carried batteries, food, medical supplies. It carried a way out. Master Sergeant Stalker Kane chewed on a strip of pine bark, trying to trick his stomach. The resupply was 2 days overdue. The sky above was a brilliant, indifferent blue, a perfect day for flying. But it was empty. Their last transmission from base was clipped, coded. Air corridor compromised, supply suspended indefinitely. Compromised. Another word that meant one thing in a briefing room and another in a hole scraped out of the frozen earth. It meant the F-35s that were supposed to sanitize the sky, to hunt down the mobile surface-to-air missile batteries that prowled these woods, were gone. Without them, the slow, fat cargo planes were just targets. Kane looked at his men. They were shadows of themselves. The cold was a living thing, a predator that was hunting them relentlessly. It seeped through their multi-layered clothing. It turned their fingers to clumsy sticks. It drained the life from their electronics. A communications sergeant was trying to coax a flicker of life from a radio whose battery was almost dead, his breath pluming in the frigid air. They were blind, deaf, and alone. Stalker thought of the irony. They were the tip of the spear, the most advanced reconnaissance unit on the planet, equipped with millions of dollars of gear, and they were slowly, inexorably freezing to death. They might starve. They were down to their last energy bars, each man hoarding his last few bites. Starvation here was not a dramatic collapse, but a slow, quiet fading, a listlessness that becomes an unwillingness to move, a shivering that eventually stops. All because somewhere, an accountant in a factory had decided to save a few pennies on a batch of bolts. Somewhere, a planner had put so much faith in a single perfect machine that there was no longer a backup. There was no plan B. They were plan A. And plan A was grounded. The promise was not just close air support. The promise was that technology had conquered the old fears of the soldier, isolation, starvation, the cold. But the old fears were back, and they were hungry. The screw hadn't just broken a plane, it had broken a promise, and left 8 men to be swallowed by the snow. The turning point, when it came, was not a thunderclap of battle. It was a whisper. It was the crack of a twig under a boot that did not belong to them. Kane saw him first, a shape detaching itself from the grey tapestry of birch and pine. Not a soldier clad in the geometric patterns of modern war, but a man dressed in the skin of the land itself. An old coat of thick wool, a rifle slung over his shoulder that was a relic from a forgotten war, its woodstock dark with the oil of 100 seasons. He moved with a quiet economy that shamed their clumsy, shivering efforts. He was not hunting them. He was simply moving through his own world, a world they had invaded with their noise and their machines, but had never understood. The man stopped, his gaze falling upon the tracks their failing boots had left in the snow. To the soldiers, the tracks were a sign of their passage. To this man, they were a story. He could read the faltering steps, the depth of the imprint that spoke of exhaustion, the unnatural stillness where they had stopped to huddle for a warmth that would not come. He looked toward their position, not with the searching eyes of a hunter stalking prey, but with the flat, knowing look of one who sees a sick animal that has wandered too far from its herd. There was no malice in his eyes. There was something far worse, pity. In that single, silent exchange, the great lie of their power was laid bare. Their multi-spectrum optics could see for miles, but they were blind. Their encrypted radios could speak to satellites, but they were deaf. Their advanced weapons could level a forest, but here in the cold they were as helpless as children. The man from the woods did not raise his rifle. He did not have to. He simply watched them for a long moment, then turned and melted back into the trees, leaving behind only silence and the crushing weight of their own irrelevance. They had not been defeated by an enemy. They had been dismissed by the landscape itself. The seasons do not wait for the follies of men. The snows deepened, and then they began to retreat. The spring thaw came as it always does, a slow, patient washing of the world. Water dripped from the pines, and the frozen earth breathed a long sigh of mist. And with the melting of the snow, the forest began to show its scars. Not the grand, gouging craters of bombs, but the small, persistent wounds left by the forgotten men. Here, tangled in the roots of a new budding rowan tree, was a glove. Its synthetic fibers, designed to function at 30,000 feet, were stiff and brittle, a parody of a human hand. There, half buried in the mud and moss, was a data pad, its screen a shattered mirror reflecting a sky it could no longer comprehend. A deer, stepping carefully through the undergrowth, nudged a spent battery pack with its nose, then moved on, uninterested in this strange, dead stone that offered no nourishment. These were not the scars of an old battle, like a rusted helmet or a spent brass cartridge that the earth might eventually claim and pull back into itself. These were alien things. A shard of polymer that will not rot for 1,000 years, a filament of wire that will poison the soil where it lies. These were the droppings of a machine that had passed through, a machine so confident in its own power that it never considered what it left behind. The land remembers. It does not forgive, it does not forget. It simply endures, and slowly, painstakingly, it works to cover the wound. A vine will grow over the rifle stock. Moss will soften the sharp edge of the broken optic. A century from now, a child might find a strange metallic rock and wonder what it was, never knowing it was once the heart of a system designed to dominate the world, a heart that stopped beating because of a single, flawed piece of metal. The war machine did not die. A new screw was forged. A new squadron of jets took to the sky. Committees were formed, reports were written, and blame was assigned in quiet, carpeted rooms thousands of miles away. They talked of stress tolerances and quality control, of redundant systems and supply chain logistics. They learned a lesson, they said, but they learned the wrong one. They looked at the broken part and saw a failure of engineering. They should have looked at the empty sky and seen a failure of philosophy. The true flaw was never in the $20 screw. It was in the $3 trillion idea. The idea that you could build a weapon so perfect it made the soldier obsolete. The idea that technology could conquer the fundamental truths of the world, that the cold kills, that the hungry starve, that a man who does not know the land is an unwelcome guest. They built a spear with a perfect shining tip, but they made the shaft out of glass. They put their faith in numbers on a screen, in the ghost that lives in the wires, and they forgot about the simple, brutal reality of the ground. The story of the grounded jet and the freezing soldiers is not just a story of a forgotten war. It is a story about us, a story of a people who have placed so much belief in their own creations that they have forgotten the strength that lies in their own two hands, the wisdom that is carried on the wind. The forest where those men vanished does not care about the F-35. The wind that whispers through the pines does not know its name. The snow falls, the seasons turn, and the earth abides, waiting. Waiting for the next great machine, the next perfect promise to be broken by something as small and as powerful as a forgotten piece of steel.